Are almost out of isolation, but Sharon tested positive
Mayor
yesterday.
Savage, we are live and broadcasting to YouTube.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. It's January the 21st, and we're having a sort of an unusual Friday meeting of Council Committee of the Whole on Halifax. We have a number of Committee of the Wholes upcoming. So I want to welcome everybody to the meeting. First thing I'd like to do is acknowledge that we're on the traditional, the unceded land of the Mi'kmaq people. The peace and friendship treaties that were signed between the Crown and the Mi'kmaq are very important to the municipality, to me, to council, and I hope people are somewhat familiar with those treaties and why they matter more than ever. I'm going to just first of all go around and see who we have with us on this ride, beginning with District 1, Councillor Daigle Gammon.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Chair, colleagues, staff, anyone who's watching. Very excited to talk about Halifax.
Awesome. Councillor Hensby, how are you?
Good morning, everyone, on this very chilly day. Doesn't feel like global warming today. Talk to you later.
Councillor Kent.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, councillors. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome. Councillor Purdy, good morning.
Good morning. Happy to be here representing District 4, and I love Councillor Russell's background. How appropriate for a freezing cold day.
Awesome. Councillor Austin, how you doing?
I'm good, Mr. Mayor. Today's weather actually is exactly what climate change would predict, this yo-yo of spring, winter, spring, winter, spring, winter that we've been having.
Right on. Councillor Mancini.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and colleagues. All ready to go to talk about Halifax.
Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Pleased to be here to parse the anecdotal from the evidence-based.
Councillor Smith, how you doing?
I'm all right, ready to go.
Councillor Cleary, good morning.
Good morrow, colleagues and residents.
Councillor Morris.
Good morning, everybody from District 10. Glad to be joining you on this frosty Friday.
Thank you. Councillor Cuttle.
Good morning, everyone, and happy Friday. Glad to be here talking about Halifax. And yeah, you know, there's never cold weather. It's just how you dress. So it's gorgeous out there. Bundle up and get out there and enjoy some fresh air.
Councillor Stoddard, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, colleagues, and those watching. I'm happy to be here and talk about Halifax.
How is the Deputy Mayor today?
Bonjour, mes collègues. I'm doing just fine today, ready to chat.
Councillor Blackburn.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Russell, how are you doing?
Doing great this morning here in sunny, but holy smokes, it's cold, Lower Sackville.
And Councillor Outfit.
Good morning. I've been looking forward to this and doing some parsing, and everybody stay warm.
Right on. Okay, thank you, colleagues. We'll go to the approval of the minutes, which we have none. The order of business and the approval of additions and deletions. Does somebody want to move the order of business?
I'll move that, Councillor Russell.
Thank you.
Stoddard?
Seconded by Councillor Stoddard. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's carried. I'm going to call for declarations of conflict of interest. Anybody here affected by climate change? We're going to move into our session today, which is on Halifax. There's sort of two pieces to it today. The staff report that we had at our council meeting last week that Councillor Austin, I think it was, moved to the Committee of the Whole, and also we have the briefing note on accountability. To start us off, I'm going to introduce our CAO, Jacques Dubé, and let him say a few words and take us from the presentation. And then after we're finished that and ready to discuss, I'll go to Councillor Mancini as Chair of Environment to lead us off on the discussion. Good morning, Jacques.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and everyone, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to Regional Council. I'm pleased to advise that I have implemented a reporting change in support of Halifax and the Energy and Environment Division particularly. So effective April 1st, Energy and Environment will move to the Corporate and Customer Service Business Unit under John McPherson's leadership. And of course, the main reasons for this change are: one, the evolution of our climate change efforts from one of policy to the implementation of Halifax. Two, most of our Halifax work internal to HRM involves significant investment in greening our fleet and our buildings and facilities, the responsibility for which resides in corporate and customer service. And of course, three, to allow planning and development under Kelly Denty's leadership to focus on primary and secondary planning, development and permit approvals and compliance, along with the important work we are doing on transportation and infrastructure planning across HRM. So additionally, to ensure, I should say, there is adequate time and support for Halifax within corporate and customer service. At the same time, we will move customer service that operates our 311 service from corporate and customer services to finance and asset management under Jerry Blackwood's leadership, and corporate safety from corporate and customer service to HR and corporate communications under Laura Nolan's leadership. So as a result of this move, Mr. Mayor, Shannon Miedema's position has been reevaluated, and effective April 1st of this year, her position will be director level, reporting to Executive Director John McPherson. So please join me in congratulating Shannon on her promotion and everyone involved in making the strategic restructuring happen. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Very glad to hear that. Thank you. That's awesome. Congratulations to Shannon, who we'll hear from shortly. Okay, so first of all, where do we go first? Do we go to the briefing note? Is there any presentation on that, Jacques, or do we go directly to Shannon and the staff presentation?
We would go directly to Shannon and the staff presentation.
Okay, let's go to Director Shannon Miedema, or soon to be. Good morning, Shannon.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to work on sharing my screen for a quick second. Can everyone see the presentation and hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that, Jacques, and good morning, Mr. Mayor Savage and Council. Shannon Miedema, still currently the Program Manager of Environment and Climate Change, but very, very happy to be switching things up and excited to dig in new ways with the organization. I'm going to give a brief overview of the first annual progress report that we've done since Halifax was implemented, and we also attached a 3-year resource plan to that. So I'll give a brief slideshow and then happy to enter into the discussions.
Just one moment, please, Shannon. This is Deputy Mayor Pam Lovelace. I just wonder if you could hold on a minute. The clerk's office needs to bring in Councillor Cuddle. She has been removed and can't get back in. Just hang on 1 second, please. I see everyone else there. Councillor Cuddle is having difficulty getting back in.
There's in the chat, she's back.
Yeah, she's just texting me right now, trying to get in.
I'm back.
I can confirm Councillor Cuddle is in the meeting.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Let's proceed.
Go ahead, Shannon.
Okay, great. So here's a familiar graph to kick us off. So this is the work that was done in developing the climate plan a few years ago now. This is the science-based energy and emissions model. And then the proposed actions and what they would do to get us down to our ultimate goal of net zero by 2050, as well as to try and significantly reduce our emissions before we blow our carbon budget in about 27 or 28. So we also have some targets to 2030. And you can see if you follow the top line that if we continued on in our kind of collective business as usual mode, accounting for things like Muskrat Falls coming online, the cleaner fuel standards federally coming online, we would actually drop in our greenhouse gas emissions by about a third by 2050. But we want to go all the way down to zero. And so the red wedges are calling for retrofitting of our existing building stock in HRM. All buildings. The green is rooftop solar. The blues are large-scale renewable energy systems. The yellow is net zero new buildings. The purple is the electrification of our transportation systems, all of them. And then the top gray bundle is the other actions, which is like water, wastewater, and industrial processes. So even if we take all of these actions as quickly and at the scale that we're being asked to do, we'd still have to offset a little bit at the end of the day to get to that ultimate net zero. That line there shows approximately when would exceed our carbon budget, which is set based on ethical considerations of being a city that has a fairly high energy intensity grid and also a relatively high GDP. So the motion that was passed to put Halifact in place in June of 2020 outlined that we would dive in on implementation, that we'd establish a target of net zero municipal operations by 2030, would prioritize our work in 7 critical areas of focus, just because it wasn't realistic to think that we would move on all 46 actions right away without building our capacity and our resources to do so. So we're doing a stepped growth as quickly as we can and focusing on where we can have the most impact and show the most leadership in our community. We were asked to return with a resource plan when we gave our annual progress update, which is an attachment to the report that you have in front of you, and to provide these annual progress reports so that council understands where we are, what we've done, what's working, what's stuck, etc. So just a bit on the municipal operations target. That includes things like retrofitting our own buildings by 2030 to reduce energy demand and put in renewable energy technologies where it's possible, to require ourselves to build net zero new buildings, which we now have an administrative order to do, which is fantastic, to electrify our fleet by 2030, and we have an electric vehicle strategy to show us the way to get there by 2030, to increase our waste diversion even further, to generate renewable energy in municipally owned projects where possible, and to purchase local zero carbon electricity when that option becomes available. So this is our actual corporate greenhouse gas emissions over time. We did the first internal calculation for the 2008 year when I started a long time ago with HRM. And right now, as of 2020, we're about 28% decreased from where we were in 2008. And that's in spite of all of the growth, all of the new buildings, expanded fleet, things like that. And from a community-wide perspective, so all the emissions within the boundary of HRM done by us and others, we've reduced about 24% since our 2016 baseline community inventory that was done by SSG as part of the Halifax modeling process. So we have some successes to celebrate, quite a few actually, and I'll just go over some briefly here. We secured some significant funding from the federal and provincial governments about the fast ferry, the Mill Cove ferry, the design work, purchasing electric buses, and electrifying our Ragged Lake Transit Facility expansion. So that work is underway. We have a team member on each of the 2 working groups for both the fast ferry and the ferry building itself to ensure that it's all as climate resilient and energy efficient as possible. We received a $175,000 grant from FCM to support the retrofit program that we're trying to get going. We have a pilot that we're starting right now, and we wanted some work done to evaluate the Solar City program from an equity lens to help us inform our retrofit program so that we can have a fully equitable community-based program. And we also have a part of that money being used on a funding project to try and figure out how we could model the program using third-party financing so that we're not the lender, which is what we do currently with Solar City. And we've submitted an application for some electric vehicle charging infrastructure through NRCan as well. As I mentioned before, we got the EV strategy approved by council, which is really exciting this year. We've got our retrofit pilot project, the administrative order for new builds, and we also signed on to the city Race to Zero and lead to COP26, which was actually easy to do because we already had those commitments and more through our climate plan. And that's a UN-based initiative that is global for cities taking action on climate. We also submitted an expression of interest to the Provincial Green Choice Program in the hopes of being able to purchase some wind energy. They're just working on those regulations right now, so that's kind of a to be determined option in the future. And to date with Solar City, we've loaned out $18 million worth of solar installations across our community. The Dartmouth North Community Center is undergoing a deep energy retrofit and has a very large solar installation on it now. And our on-site energy manager and CCS are finalizing municipal energy roadmap to kind of show us the path forward for retrofitting our corporate buildings to adhere to that municipal 2030 target. The funds that we had in our climate account were used in part for purchasing electric bikes for parking services, purchasing paying the delta so that our ice resurfacer could be an electric one instead of a regular gas one, and putting some more solar installations on some of our community buildings. And a third of the regional center all ages and abilities bike network is now complete. On the adaptation side, we have purchased a refrigerated truck to support our vulnerable communities in extended power outages. So we heard from community when we were developing the plan, and Erica from Emergency Management, who works deep in community in emergency situations, heard that something like a refrigerated truck to save food would be one of the key ways that we could support communities during extended power outages so that their food can be preserved from their freezers and fridges, et cetera. And so that is, we're waiting for it to come. It's not here yet, but we are going forward with that, and it'll be used by the mobile food market until, and then just get mobilized in emergency situations. So we're really excited about that. We also helped with the Prince Albert Road Rain Garden that was installed as part of that road project, and helped to plant more trees than would have otherwise happened with the Urban Forest Master Plan this year. We recently submitted a natural infrastructure funding application. This is a new funding stream federally for natural infrastructure, which is really exciting. And we're focusing on the Shore Road area of Easter Passage, and it's a $5 million project, and we're just waiting to hear back on that. But it would be looking to build resilience to coastal and extreme weather impacts on that road using a natural approach and making sure there's good places for public use like trails and benches and things like that as well. So we're really hopeful for that. And just highlighting also the acquisition of the land in addition to the funds for Blue Mountain Birch Cove as being a really important piece on the adaptation side. Center plan was approved, and that extended the vertical coastal setback requirements to include commercial and industrial and not just residential, which is really exciting as well. And what else do I want to highlight here? We are working on some climate hazard mapping, beginning with flooding. Some emergency backup generators were installed at at community locations so that they could act as emergency comfort centers during extreme weather. And we completed a natural asset inventory in partnership with the Municipal Natural Assets Initiative, MNAI. And that is the first step in being able to include natural assets in our overall corporate asset management program and approach. So that's a long list. Hopefully I didn't bore you with all of the great things that HRM is doing. And, you know, I'm proud, and we should all be very proud of these accomplishments. The kicker is that they don't meet the scale and the speed of what's required to hit our 2030 and 2050 targets collectively in our community. We're about 20% on track and about 14% adequately resourced, as is detailed in the report. So we need to continue securing our resources, really thinking about systems change, mainstreaming our climate action, focusing on education and awareness, and focusing on spurring that collective action by everybody. This is a figure that we used when we were doing the engagement to develop the plan and come to consensus on our targets. And each block is a week. And the very first block is the date that Council declared the climate emergency. And then you can see when Halifax was approved after the green ones are finished. And then you can see, oh, I didn't update it since the Environment Committee meeting, but so it says this week of December 13th. And then you can see how many blocks or weeks we have left until we exceed our carbon budget in around 2027, 2028. So this is pretty impactful. It's 150 weeks since the emergency was declared, and we have 264 weeks until we pass that carbon budget. Time is flying. So critical next steps for success from our perspective are to continue working on the shared accountability of the climate plan across our organization with every business unit, and to really try and mainstream climate thinking and action throughout the organization and the community. So I mentioned this in the environment meeting, and you do have the accountability document with you now, I believe. In the summer, we had gone to senior leadership to talk about this, and then we went to every business unit through the summer and fall to discuss the assigning and accepting of responsibility of different pieces of the climate plan, because we know that if we just kind of are focused on it as the environment and climate change team, we're not going to get as much work done as fast as we need to. So we really need it to be kind of held and led and pushed by as many people as possible. And so that was really great. We got feedback from every business unit on what made sense from their perspective, and what supports they would need to move forward. So what do they need from the environment and climate team? What do they need in terms of resources, people, and funding? How can we support their budget and business planning process? And how can we enable them to be ready to go on moving on some of these actions? So that was a really great kind of first initial step at this conversation. Yeah, I'll leave that there. So the 3-year resource plan that you have, this is just kind of a summary table of our estimation of what's needed based on all the conversations we had with the business units and based on the work that our team is doing and what we know is kind of coming up. So we broke it down by core area and also enabling actions, which is kind of like the mainstreaming and the education and stuff like that. And so the total is about 25 people, and there's compensation for those people listed there at $2.5 million over the 3 years, and then some operating costs and some capital costs. And it's really important to secure sustained funding for this effort. We know that implementing Halifax is going to save us and our stakeholders and our community money in the long term. And if we have committed funds, we can leverage them for greater impact. We're always applying for federal funding. We're looking at ways that we can leverage private investment with our public dollars, that type of thing. And we know, or studies are showing that on the adaptation side, so preparing for impact and trying to be more resilient, for every dollar we invest is anticipated to save us 6 in future impact costs. And on the mitigation side, the climate modeling work we had done had a financial model to it. And in the collective, so investment by not just us as an organization, but everyone within HRM, the investment over the 30 years is about 22 billion, but it shows that we're actually up an additional 22 billion almost at the end of the day by 2050, and that we start to see those gains in the early 2030s. And that's really high level, whole bunch of assumptions and estimates associated with it, but it just gives us a sense. And those savings are largely because of driving down our energy demand while electrifying. So we're paying less for our energy. We're paying less for operating and maintenance costs, and then we're getting revenues from renewable energies. So we need to consider all potential financing mechanisms at our disposal and look for new ones if possible. And committed capital and operating year over year are really going to help us be able to plan our work going forward. I just kind of talked about the savings here already, got ahead of myself. The other piece to it is, you know, with COVID and the economic recovery, we do have an ability to do things differently as we recover and invest in things that are aligned with also getting us to our climate goals. And that's a conversation that's happening from the global level all the way down to the local level. And the partnership put a green, like a transition to a low carbon economy as one of the actions in the recovery plan for the city. And there is a green economy lens, as I think you see now, to the new 5-year economic growth strategy as well. And then it's really important to also note the social opportunity of acting on climate and investing in operationalizing this plan, because we know that our vulnerable communities are hit first and worst by climate impacts. And so we're really trying to have an equity lens in the work that we're doing now, and we did as we were developing the plan. We know that if we can drive down the cost and spending on energy, we're going to help on the energy poverty side of things. And really acting now is going to help our future generations, because this problem's not going away. And the more we do now, the better we'll be in facing some of those impacts. We know even if we were to stop emitting emissions right now, we'd still be facing increasing consequences over time just because of the way the science works. So the more we can do now, the better. And, you know, we're seeing a lot of movement by our stakeholders, which is really fantastic. The provincial government coming up with new legislation and new commitments for Nova Scotia Power is all going to be, you know, very game changing for us and for Nova Scotia. And we're really excited about that. But really, our systems are slow. We have a lot of boxes that need ticking to move on things, and so trying to find ways to move faster but still move responsibly is really important. And really, there's no reason to not do something or to slow down right now, just because we know how much time and work it takes to move the needle on these things. So just, you know, we always try really hard to frame implementing the climate plan as an investment. It's an investment in our communities and our safety and the vibrancy of our community. There are actual savings. There is a return on investment. There are a lot of funding opportunities right now and partnership opportunities. And we have such a great amount of support with our stakeholders. We still have quarterly meetings with the Halifax Stakeholder Network. We have over 100 people attending every time. It's a really great group of people from all organizations and communities. I'm always happy to grow that as well, so I'll put that out there. Anyone who wants to join as a stakeholder, we're very happy. We still have some missing people in our meetings. And I think I will leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Shannon. Really appreciate all the work that is continued to go into this, and in terms of stakeholders, you can look at the Halifax report and see how many people were consulted, but I know I've bought you into groups that I'm involved in, and everything from the universities and the partnership and everything else, and there is a lot of support for this and community impetus as to why we need to get this done. Okay, so I had mentioned I'd have Councillor Mancini put the motion on the floor. The motion was at Environment Committee, and the motion was to bring it here for a discussion. So there isn't a motion specifically today on this one at this point. So it's to have people understand where we are. And of course, we're heading into the budget process, and this is to inform our budget considerations in a very significant way. So I will go to Councillor Mancini.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Shannon, thank you very much. First of all, congratulations, well deserved. Your commitment to this topic is outstanding, and as the mayor just alluded to, when he brings you along with him, so he can look smarter because you have all the answers and the directions. It's appreciated by all of us, and congratulations on your position. You know, and I think I heard this from you at one of the presentations at the environment. Acting now will save dollars, prevent loss, preparing communities, and improve well-being. And the mayor also alluded to this. I'm overlapping here. I realize this is not a discussion about budget, but that's where my head is right now. And you talked about your 3-year resource plan, and you talked about where we are when we will exceed our carbon budget. You know, I'm looking at when I had the conversation with the average resident. This is big. This is hard for them to understand. And it's hard for the average resident who's concerned about paying their bills and how much is the tax going to go up and what does this do for me? It's hard for them to understand. And you talked about the return on investment and the benefits of all this. Can you speak to, you know, the non-action or less action, right? So as we get into our budget conversation, there's going to be a conversation. I mean, some of my colleagues here are not in favor of spending too much on this topic, even though they'll agree with what you presented today, because it's going to have an implication, potentially an implication on budget. Can you speak to if you know what's going to happen if we don't put the money up now, as you're asking us to do, as the science is telling us we should be done?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to the council. Yeah, I mean, the more we delay action, what we're being told by the scientific community and all the think tanks is that we're going to be spending more at the end of the day. Really, it's not optional to spend money on climate. It's whether you do it now in the way that you have some control over, and in a less expensive way, especially when we think about loss. Like, we don't want lost lives. We don't want extremely damaged infrastructure. We don't want, you know, our transportation corridors impacted. So, and we don't want, you know, again, we don't want all of those horrible things that happen when we have extreme events. So really, and when those events happen, there's some of those costs that are covered through insurance, but not all. And there's you know, a very big conversation going on around insurance and what it is and isn't going to cover over time. There's already now additional flood insurance, even for homeowners, right? If at the end of the day we don't do anything, we get in a more flood vulnerable situation and homeowners aren't able to have insurance or afford that insurance, you know, there's huge cost to be borne by somebody on that. And so it's really about trying to take smart investments now. And it's not just about reducing the greenhouse gas emissions. It's really about safeguarding our community going forward. The plan is both pieces, right? And the benefit of it, talking about it in that way, is that you can kind of see why it's really important to do it when you focus on health and safety and community. And then you can see where those savings come in when you focus on the reduction, because you're spending less on energy, because you're spending less on operating and maintenance. We've seen the return on our investment with all of the efficiency work we've done in our buildings year over year. Having that on-site energy manager for the last 3-4 years has been fantastic, because we're really tracking that, and we can show that we're already at almost $1.5 million of savings every single year, because it's shaved right off the top of our operating expenses on those buildings, right? So Yeah, that's what I say to that, is that at the end of the day, we're going to be spending, like, if you look at all the major events that happen here in the States, like, look at all of the money. Look at all of the money. Where's that all coming from, right? And if we can spend smart money in safeguarding our coastal roads, in looking at our evacuation routes and our energy systems and all of those things, then I think we'll be saving money. Yeah.
And I know my time is up, but this is the message we need to get. I think of Mr. and Mrs. Jones, who's retired, trying to stay in their house, and they're concerned about every dollar. For them to try to get that around their head to understand how important this is. And I think that's our job, obviously, too. I think the municipality's job to continue to get that message out. So I'll come back, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Shannon, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Shannon, for the very thorough presentation and all the work that you, your team, and everyone has been doing on this very important issue. I just want to ask off the start, because I know we discussed it in environment, but I suspect probably some of my colleagues might have had the same reaction when reading the report. I mean, my initial thought when I looked at this and the resourcing element was like, well, we can hire more staff. That's something we can do quicker. But from what you were indicating in environment, that's not necessarily helpful at this time. That the 3-year resource plan is more about growing the complement in a way that we can actually absorb and make use of it, versus flooding ourselves with new people that we have to onboard each and every one of them. Is that accurate?
Mr. Mayor, through you to the councillor, I did say that at Environment Committee, and then I thought a lot about it since. And I think it kind of depends how we would go about it, because I was just thinking about onboarding staff into my group from my perspective, and the length of time that process takes. But if we were to consider onboarding staff across the organization, and having maybe even a few more, because what happened was we went and had these early conversations with business units over the summer, and we said, you know, do you need people? What do you need? Do you need half a person? Do you want us to share a person? Do you need a new person? But it takes time to like organize around that and figure out what, you know, okay, what's the step I'm taking next year versus in 2 and in 5 years, and what do I think I need for that? So I think after a little bit of time, I've had some conversations with people saying, you know, I could benefit from another person or two in the next 1 or 2 years. So there is a placeholder in the way we've been organizing the operating budget for next year. You know, I'm asking for some additional staff, but then we have 2 that are kind of unassigned. It would be up to, you know, senior management and the CIO if they wanted to consider that number to be more than 2.
Oh, I'm on council, literally. Sorry, joys of working at home. Where was I? Yeah, well, thank you for that answer. And that's something I will take away as we go into budget deliberations, since we always do build a parking lot of items. And I mean, I think you know, getting the appropriate resources behind this plan as quickly as possible is absolutely what we need to do, because we're not going to achieve things with holes in without the people to do them. So that kind of brings me to my next piece. I appreciate the briefing note where things are broken down nicely by business unit. I mean, I went through and I was just kind of highlighting all the ones that's like, okay, starting 2020 or starting this year, the things that we're supposed to have underway. And, you know, some of them have some check marks by them. Some of them simply don't have anything by them. If we accept the 3-year resource plan, does that start to move some of these ones that have X's, not started, not on track, into check marks? I guess what I'm getting at is, I felt like reading the report, you know, what I was kind of looking for was like, if you do X, you will get Y. And you know, it's hard to kind of to draw that, like, with the information that we have. And so, you know, when something is got an X on it in the report, if in the 3-year resource plan, will we, if it's one that's supposed to start, is it, I guess what I'm going for, is it a complete 3-year resource plan? Or even if we follow the resource plan, are we still going to end up with lots of X's over the next kind of 3 years that we just simply haven't gotten to? I know that's kind of hard because we're developing our implementation.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, through you to the councillor. Yeah, it is tricky. We did that. This is a bit of a subjective assessment based on what we know we've been doing and then the discussions we had across the organization. So yes, the more capacity we build, the more we will be progressing on the report card. It's hard for me to know, like, if we would actually move the needle on a bunch of those X's, probably not every single one. The 3-year resource plan was our best guess, focused on the 7 core areas. So the 7 core areas encapsulate a lot of the actions of the climate plan, but not all. And there are actually some actions in there that were not set to begin right away. There's a lot of the short and immediate term actions, but there's some a little more, you can see the legend, right? Like a little more medium or long term, just to give us some breathing room and hope of success on some of the stuff we need to do first. So it was done, to the best of our ability, but I think can just be refined as we go over time and continue to collaborate with different departments. And it also depends on what the community is doing. So this is largely an assessment of us corporately, but these actions are both corporate and community. So there are some things where we're probably going to still have an X because we're probably still waiting for some legislation or something like that, right? So a few caveats there. But yeah, the idea is that we think that this is a solid plan to really get us moving on like the full implementation over 3 years. Yeah.
Okay, I've probably burned through all my time, so I'll just conclude. I'll come back for the rest. I'll just conclude this thought with just when we next get this report in a year's time, I think it would be helpful in the next draft to have a more clear linkage of this is the gap, this is what you need to do, this is what we need to do to fill it.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Councillor, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you so much. And just picking up on what Councillor Austin said, I agree. I do think we need a little bit of a gap analysis to dig deeper in what are the pieces that we're missing. Congratulations, Shannon. This is going to be awesome. I think it's the work that you and the staff have done throughout all business units is really important to mainstreaming what climate action actually looks like in HRM. And I totally recognize we're waiting for legislation, and waiting for some sort of a downloading maybe of responsibility from the province and ways that we can align some of the work that we're doing at this municipality with some of our other neighboring municipalities as well, especially when we consider shoreline and coastal action in particular. I just have a couple of questions for you. And am I to understand that on slide 9, when it says acquisition of 1.25 acres, that was all the acquisition that we had for 2020 for this previous year? Because that's a little concerning. But I do know that Nova Scotia Nature Trust has been moving full steam ahead and acquiring land for Blue Mountain Birch Cove Lakes, which is awesome. The other thing I'm wondering is in regards to the really, really cool project and work that's being done on Shore Road and Eastern Passage, whether or not there has been discussions, looking forward to that road transfer. And all of the roads that are coming over from the province to the municipality, and thinking about that, coastal storm surge mitigation, how are we managing those conversations now? Do we have the resources to be able to do that and consider issues that are coming forward? And the reason I'm raising that is because of the significant stormwater concerns that we've had in Bootlers Point. We had just in this last week road closures from Hubbards to Queensland. Now I understand that those roads aren't coming over, but I think we need to kind of look long term. How are we managing, coastal protection and property protection on the shoreline? The other thing I wanted to raise with you was the emergency comfort centers. Those are so important in our rural areas because we don't have access to municipal comfort centers or municipal owned facilities. So working hand in hand with community to create these and open these comfort centers and have them so that when we do have 3-day power outages as we had last week, that those centers have the generators that we need, that they can open to provide comfort. Because we have to keep in mind that the social cost of not having power is quite significant, in particular to seniors and youth. So I just wanted to raise that. And my last point, I guess, is around the recognition that we're only 14% adequately resourced. And so to that point, in the accountability document, some of the items have the green check marks. Some of the items say that they are on track or they're not on track with a red cross, with a red X, sorry. But we also have those boxes that are left empty. So I'm wondering, is there wiggle room there? Are they kind of started, maybe not started? Maybe I just missed it. But I'm just wondering, are there some items that potentially are about to kick into gear and just haven't received that green check mark yet? I think that's it for now. But I do want to thank staff for providing that briefing note. It really gave us a great understanding of the integration here between what's happening with your climate team, Shannon, and all the business units, and embedding this work into our regular daily business. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to the council. Okay, so Blue Mountain Birch Cove, I am not an expert on all of those comings and goings, but that was an update that we received when we were asking for successes across the organization for the climate report. And it said that through the Parkland Acquisition Program that supports the Green Network Plan, this fiscal year saw the 1.25 acres of land through the transfer of a former school in Tangier, new parkland in Middle Musquodoboit, and a contribution of $750,000 to the Nova Scotia Nature Trust for the Blue Mountain Birch Cove Lakes land acquisition. So I'm not sure if there's anyone on the line that wanted to speak more to that, but that's where we got that one from. For Shore Road, yeah, the scoping of the funding application was for a piece of road that we own. That is a highly vulnerable coastal road. It's not the full very long length of Shore Road, so it's kind of a first piece. But yeah, we recognize that we're taking over a lot of those provincial roads, and I know that people across the organization have been working to prepare for that in different departments like TPW. But you're right, it's definitely going to have implications for what we need to spend if we are going to safeguard some of those more vulnerable roads over time. I do have Samantha Page on the line, who is our climate adaptation specialist, and this will be our first time in front of Regional Council. So welcome, Sam. She can just speak a little bit more in detail about some of the work we're doing on protecting coastal roads.
Thanks, Shannon. Can you hear me okay?
We got you. Go ahead, Samantha. Thank you. Welcome
Great.
to council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just a little bit more to expand on what Shannon was talking about. So we have been, sea level rise, as everyone knows, is a really big challenge here, being a very coastal municipality and province. So one of the big pieces that we're working on is actually updating all of our sea level rise projections to include like storm surge as well as high tides. So we'll actually have probably by the end of this fiscal have updated amounts that can be incorporated into all of our planning, can help inform all of the land use bylaws and all of our vertical setbacks, as well as kind of to inform all of the hazard mapping that we're doing. So that's a really, really crucial piece. It includes the most recent science from the IPCC AR6 report, which is kind of that global climate holder of knowledge. So that's an exciting piece. And then from the road perspective, roads and transportation are considered a large piece of critical infrastructure. And that's another big piece of work that we are doing and is prioritized in this council strategic priorities. And so that will really be informed by a lot of the hazard mapping that we're doing. So we're looking to update our, provide comprehensive hazard maps for all of HRM for the coastal and overland flooding. And those will go in to then identify all of the critical infrastructure pieces that we have in HRM, and then be able to prioritize those pieces based on the vulnerability that they have to our different climate change impacts. So really, really important piece of work, but that should be able to provide a lot more clarity on costing and the areas that we need to prioritize first, and also including vulnerable communities in that, and making sure that that's included in the equation to make sure that we're getting the resources to the places that need it the most.
Do I just have one more? I just wanted clarification. Thank you for that, Samantha. So it sounds like from a timing perspective, this sea level rise projection work will be done in time to inform the regional plan and all of that work. So it sounds like it's timing. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
And just to answer the rest of your questions, Mr. Mayor, through you to the councillor, the blanks you're seeing in the report card, I'm told there's a typo. They're all filled in the accountability piece that you got and in the progress report, but maybe in the overall council report, they're blank. And there's, I think, 6 actions, and all of those actually have started. So I'm really sorry for that. I'm not sure what happened, maybe in converting to PDF or something like that. But just to assure you that all of those blanks actually have begun. And I think Sam spoke a little bit to emergency comfort centers, but we are working more and more with emergency management on our response in extreme weather to vulnerable communities. And so she's been working on getting more and more backup generators into buildings so that they can be classified as emergency comfort centers, and even looking at the backup source being propane instead of diesel, because that's better from a greenhouse gas perspective. Yeah, and so there's a lot of work ongoing on that front that she's probably better able to speak to, but I know a little bit about it.
Okay. Thank you. I just want to remind all councillors, I think we're in committee of the whole. You can speak a number of times. I just mentioned that because we're averaging over 9 minutes per speaker in the early going here. And we've had some of our masters of having 5-minute questions, which demand 5-minute answers. So we're not under any rush. We got all day and tomorrow until kickoff. So just take your time, ask your questions, and you can come back as many times as you want. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and congratulations, Shannon, on the promotion. That is fantastic, and also top marks to your Rolling Stone collage in your background. That is pretty cool. I just had a couple of rapid fire questions. How does our progress stack up against other similar sized cities? Are we playing catch up here? Second question, what is the status of the Sackville floodplain study? I know that's one study that's been in the hopper for a long time. It's somewhat overdue. And do you have a solid plan going forward for further floodplain studies, floodplain mapping, I guess I should say? Plans in the works for a conservation zone to protect wetlands and other sensitive areas. Is that something that is envisioned? And also a question about the proposed 3% climate tax that we're going to be debating during budget talks. I mean, you say that we're 14% funded. How is that 3% climate tax going to move the needle on that 14%? And that's all my rapid fire questions. Thank you.
Adam.
Mr. Mayor, through you to the council. If we're here all day, I'm not sure I'm going to make it to the end of the day. Okay, those are all great questions. Thank you very much. In terms of stacking up with other cities, I'd say that we're doing well. We are part of a network of environmental managers of cities, and we support each other. So if one has led on an electric vehicle strategy, we beg, borrow, and steal everything we can and all the learnings and try and get it, better when we're making it, and we share all of our learnings on the work that we're doing. There are obvious like leading cities, Vancouver being one, and different cities are leading in different ways and doing different things based on their context and their different opportunities. So whether there's legislative barriers or opportunities and things like that, but we're tracking very well. And in terms of our climate plan, when we released it, that was definitely one of the ultimate leading plans in North America. So happy about that, just needing to do the proper implementation so we can hit it and it's not just a plan, right? But yeah, we really enjoy the relationships we have with Canadian cities, and I think it's great that Mayor Savage is chair of the Big City Mayors Caucus as well, to be able to advocate for cities and what they need at the federal level in terms of lots of issues, but including climate change. In terms of the Sackville floodplain study, that was actually done a very long time ago, and planning was in the process of amending all of the policies for the flood zones. And I know that that's not yet complete. There was some public engagement done, and we're actually circling back on that with various people in planning to try and pick it back up. We have benefited from some new people on our team recently. So we have a new environmental planner, Matthew Conlin, who is solely focused on helping us embed some of the work we need to do on the kind of nature and climate side of things in planning policy and decision making. So he has some capacity to start digging in on projects like this. So we're just kind of getting going on that. But I can definitely get back to you with a proper response once I talk to regional planning about that project. In terms of conservation zones, so, we have the Green Network Plan, and we're also working on figuring out how to drive that forward and resource that. And I'm also excited because we have a new environmental specialist, brand new position on my team, and Emma Bocking is filling that position. And she came from Ducks Unlimited and is a wetland specialist and has been working really well with the city and with the wetland group that's kind of across different levels of government and with all the key stakeholders. And so we're really excited about the work that's going to happen there. She actually just started last week. So lots more to come on those fronts. And sorry, you asked about the climate tax. I forget your question.
Yeah, I mean, the 3% climate tax, we're 14% funded right now. And how far is the needle going to move with that 3% climate tax, in your opinion?
So I think the 14% resource is 14% resourced. So not just funded in terms of capacity as well, in terms of people. And, we've put forward what we need from a capital and operating perspective year over year, and finance is translating that. And I know we do have finance on the call, so I'm not sure if someone would like to speak to that question.
Bruce Fisher's face come up.
Oh, good day. Bruce Fisher, Director of Financial Policy and Planning. So the climate action tax is focused on the capital side, not the operating side. And that funds 100% of Halifax for the next 4 years. So all of Halifax capital requests for the next 4 years are funded, as is the phase one of the electric vehicles. So those things are all within the climate change. What's not within the climate change would be the things that are farther out, and electric buses phase 2 in the Burnside Transit Garage. So I don't know how that translates into a percentage, but what we've managed to do is fund a lot of the stuff that's upfront, and we still have some significant movement to make on some of the rocks that are farther out.
All right. So it sounds to me like we're on good solid footing. We're at a good walking pace, and this climate tax will get us to the point where we're actually running. Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Just on clarification, Bruce, before you go, and or Shannon, so the climate levies 3% is on capital. So then bodies that are needed to do that are embedded within the operating part of it, Shannon, I assume, in your budget? Other than the ones you mentioned you may need now that you indicated you might not have before?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the 8 for next year, I believe, are in my budget under operating. I don't know if Bruce has anything else to add on that.
Yeah, no, that's my understanding. So we worked very closely with Halifax to make sure that what they needed in year one was completely embedded in their budget. So I believe everything is in there and is supported. There is a small piece that's supported by the Strategic Initiative Operating Reserve, and I think there is one position maybe that's starts partway through the year, but it should all be in there.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Shannon, for a great presentation. I really appreciate the clarity about how far we've come, but also how much work we have to do. Behind me, some councillors saw this at CPED. This is this is not a beach. This is not a rocky shore. This is Shore Drive not Shore Drive. This is Sailor Memorial Way in Point Pleasant Park, after the same storm that put all of that rock over the boardwalk in Eastern Passage on the night of the 17th of January. And when we were walking around there with park staff, it became clear that this kind of activity is happening with an increasing regularity. Stuff that used to happen every 5 years is happening every year or two, and straight up nor'easters that happen, 2 or 3 times a winter are now more energetic and the water is higher. And if it hits when you have a full moon and high tide, you end up with this, which is unusual and requires us to do things differently in the park. So, it's been interesting because I posted a bunch of photos I took on that walk on my Facebook page, and there is definitely a diversity of opinion about what we should do. My opinion is you can't armor the bank and protect the park and keep it forever so that nothing changes. The water is going to rise. The water is always going to win. And just like we're saying in some coastal communities, there's an element here of retreating from the water and hardening farther up the bank away from the energy of the wave action and the impacts of the storms. And so that requires folks, even this small piece requires folks to think differently and talk about making change that a lot of people are uncomfortable with. So we're having that discussion, and that's coming out. There's a plan in the budget to have engagement and make a plan for what to do here. I guess for me, I'd like to make a motion, if I may, and I know that Councillor Austin has one coming about this year's budget, but I want to look ahead. I had a conversation with Sam, with Councillor Austin and Councillor Morris that was set up by a local environmental group. And we talked to former Councillor Henderson, Ben Henderson from Edmonton. And Edmonton did this in 2019, and I think it's a good idea for us to do it too. So I'll put the motion on the floor. I'll speak to it briefly. I move that Committee of the Whole recommend to Regional Council that the Chief Administrative Officer be directed to prepare a staff report on implications of establishing a corporate carbon budget in line with the modeling in Halifax 2050, and require future municipal reporting for all business units to demonstrate how activities meet or exceed the carbon budget goals. I so move.
Second.
Okay.
And I just put it in chat there, and I already gave it to the clerk, so he has a copy of it. So, I mean, very briefly, we need to have in all reports that how we are meeting our carbon budget, and we need to have. One of the things Edmonton did is they, went through and they had their 135, megaton carbon budget for the city to hit their goals by 2030 and 2050. And then they, as a part of this process, they did the modeling and realized they would consume that budget in 6 years and they would have nothing left. So, the first part of this is, at the rate we're going, when do we run out? And Shannon already spoke to that a little bit, but I think that would need to be in this report. And then it's establishing for every business unit and every project. And to be clear, there are implications, because what this means is we're going to have to start using CarbonCure or something similar for all of our concrete. And we're going to have to start making sure that everything we do is coming inside of the carbon budget. But I think we need to have that discussion. So I look for council's or Committee of the Whole support to move that forward and get that staff report on what that would look like. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Thank you, staff. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you. So that motion is on the floor. Ian, seconded. Councillor Kent on Way's motion, Councillor Mason's motion.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This one actually, I really appreciate this motion, Way, and it leads to really some of the questions that I had earlier, which also Councillor Blackburn asked, which was really around having an understanding of every time we allocate budget to this, what is it that we can expect? What it would be our best estimate, and try to reach that in whatever capacity. I know that Councillor Mancini noted some of the councillors that would support this and not necessarily vote for it, but that's what budget debate's all about. We sort of set the tone for us, for our residents to have a sense of what lens we're looking at budget debate. And we set a tone for staff of what kinds of measures we're asking them to tighten up so that we can achieve this without necessarily increasing taxes to the degree of which would be presented to us. And so this, I think, is a really good piece, particularly for us during the budget process, to have even on a fairly regular basis throughout this process, because that's a big chunk of what we're going to be debating, not just about today. So I'm happy to support it and encourage other councillors to as well, because I think it's a really good tool for us to have.
Thank you, Councillor. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you so much. Fully support this. Really, really great to see this coming forward. I guess my question would be specific to the implementation of something like this, and whether or not we should be considering an amendment, a friendly amendment to this motion to actually put a deadline, considering next year, and the year after, putting some of these goals into the business unit planning process. So I'm just wondering whether or not the councillor had, yes, okay, great. I'm sure you're thinking about that, but for the implementation perspective, it would be beneficial to have some kind of a timeline associated. Thank you.
Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I absolutely agree. I would expect this to be in place by next year. I think it's a big chunk of work. So Councillor Austin has shared his motion where he's suggesting that each business unit be required to include what they're doing to meet Halifax, and that would be the next motion as a separate motion. I would love, and it's been shared that the carbon budget is one of the actions on action 38 of the plan. So, I agree, but based on, after talking to Ben, Councillor Henderson, I went and read the reports reporting that in, the Edmonton Journal and stuff like that. And it took them over a year to get the work done, and they passed it and they're doing it, but it's just so much work, right? To nail it down and have a process and insert that in the staff process. So I agree with the intent of what you're saying, Councillor Lovelace, but I think that having the two motions kind of gets us to where we need to be this year and gives enough runway to staff for the larger piece. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. All right, ready for the question on Councillor Mason's motion?
Question. Beginning with District 13, Deputy Mayor Lovelace.
Voting yes.
14, Councillor Blackburn.
Voting in favor of the motion.
15, Councillor Russell.
In favor?
16, Councillor Otis.
Voting yes.
Mayor Savage.
Yes.
1, Councillor Daigle Gammon.
Voting in favor of the motion.
2, Councillor Hensby.
Affirmative.
3, Councillor Kent.
In favor.
4, Councillor Purdy.
Is it too late to ask a question of clarification? I was too slow in the chat.
I think we have to go with the vote, and then I'll come back to you, Councillor Purdy. We're into a vote.
Okay, yes.
5, Councillor Austin.
In favor.
6, Councillor Mancini.
Voting in favor of the motion.
7, Councillor Mason.
For the motion.
8, Councillor Smith.
4.
9, Councillor Cleary.
Yes.
10, Councillor Morse.
In favor.
11, Councillor Cuttle.
In favor?
And 12, Councillor Stoddard.
In favor of the motion.
Thank you.
Well, the amendment passes. I'll go to Councillor Purdy, who wanted to ask a question and see where that takes us. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Apologies for that. That question happened so quickly. I was just going to ask, does this create implications to our budget this year? This report?
Jerry Blackwood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jerry Blackwood, CFO. No, this would not create any implications to our budget this year. This would be work we would have to undertake and plan in 22-23. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor and colleagues, for the great discussion so far, and Shannon and your team. So I had three questions. One was around the 3-year resource plan, and Councillor Austin already covered that, so I won't go back in there. But I did have some questions on how we're going to move that forward in some of the boxes there. What I'm wondering is just continuing a conversation of leveraging other money through other partners. And me and Shannon had a great meeting this week with FCM and learned there's potential of us being able to leverage some more funding with some of our ideas there. So I'm just wondering, Shannon, and I know that your team is always scouring, trying to find money. So I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that, just so folks know that we're not just trying to put the burden all on HRM. We are trying to leverage more and more money as we can, and some of the places you're looking to do that. And I'm also curious around, have we talked to any of the private industry potentially to support our plans? And just for an example, are we talking to construction companies? Are we talking to steel companies? Are we talking to energy companies in the private sector who would benefit from looking at the climate action and looking at somehow working with them to meet some of our goals? And the other one, which is going to come forward through motion to Councillor Austin. So again, thank you, was just around how our business units are going to incorporate our actions in how they are going to support climate. So I'll speak more about supporting that motion when we come down to it. So I only have the question around leveraging money through other funding and private industry.
Mr. Mayor, through you to the council. Thank you. Yes, those are very good questions. So FCM has been a long time supporter of Halifax and every other municipality in Canada. Our first ever big chunk, from our perspective anyway, was for the pilot program for Solar City, which was a loan and grant type of, like their kind of normal offering through the Green Municipal Fund. We have benefited from a lot of federal funding through ISIP on the infrastructure side as a team, and then supporting others across the organization. Those applications now require climate lenses. So we've been helping support actually writing the climate lenses, both mitigation and adaptation considerations of the project and what the project will do, because that's kind of a requirement now for federal funding, that they understand if the funding is aligned with their kind of climate objectives. So that's great. And then provincially, we've benefited many times from the Low Carbon Communities Fund, and that's helping gather our design team we have for the retrofit pilot program. We have partnerships with non-government organizations to do work, memorandums of understanding. I could probably list a long time on the funding side. We're happy about the new natural infrastructure funding. There's some climate resilience funding. On the EV strategy, we're looking for funding through what's called ZEVIP, which is through NRCan for zero emission vehicles funding. And most of it is all rolling funding. So that's really great. And then on the private side, we've been working with the Halifax Partnership. There's a foreign direct investment strategy work piece that's being undertaken right now on developing the green economy here in Nova Scotia. Steel Auto has done some fantastic work on the private side with charging infrastructure, and now they have merged with the All EV, the used electric vehicle business that we have here. And they have their new warehouse on Kempt Road in Halifax. And then there's also some work being done through the Halifax Innovation Outpost, which is kind of a partnership of the city and the Halifax Partnership. And one of those pieces of work that is ongoing is about potentially having a CEO charter for climate action that large employers in the city could sign on to show some commitment. And all of that kind of spurs more work, more funding, more partnerships, and more investments. I think that I saw the CAO's hand up there.
Mr. Dubé.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Just to build on, just to add one more piece of information in relation to Shannon's comments, we are aggressively pursuing funding from a variety of sources, and I'm happy to advise, and you may have heard this before, I'm sure you have, Mr. Mayor, but council may not be aware, but the partnership, Halifax Partnership, has received some funding from the federal government to support partnerships work associated with investment attraction in 2022, which includes development of phase 2 of Halifax's green foreign direct investment strategy, as well as research and marketing and sales efforts to grow Halifax's clean tech and ocean sectors. So that's just an example of one of the things that we're doing along with some of our partners. Thank you.
Thank you. Shannon, anything else?
Thank you, Shannon. Jacques.
Thank you. Councillor Smith, you're good? Thank you. Councillor Daigle-Gammon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Shannon. Always informative to listen to you and your presentation, so thank you. And I really enjoyed the briefing notes, and I'm a visual learner, so I will say the briefing note in that beautiful chart really was a nice way to see within the business units, where do things belong, what the business unit sponsor is, and then the units that support them. It goes a little bit to the conversation that we had at Environmental and Sustainability Committee about embedding the positions within business units as they're doing in Vancouver, like that. And I was just wondering, do you see this evolving in that way? That, instead of having a Halifax department, that it might be, spread within the business units of which you are the connector or the glue kind of thing, a core team. So I was curious about that. When we look at the 3-year resource plan, the numbers kind of do jump a little bit, that you think a position and $100,000. So there's what kind of expertise are you looking for in those positions that warrant those numbers? People will sort of look at that and say, wow, that's significant. And when we look at the 3-year resource plan, do you see those 25 positions being permanent, being contract? That, like, how do you see that over time, those positions and where they reside? Thank you.
Shannon.
Mr. Mayor, through you to the councillor. Thanks for the great questions. Yeah, about the embedding, we had talked about that at senior leadership because Vancouver has been doing it for so long. I think 8 times when I spoke to them, where they'll kind of loan a person out for a couple of years to embed them to drive a piece of work, whether it's a new program or a big project or policy change, some barrier, something like that. And at the end of the 2 years, they would take them back unless that department decided that they were critical to their core business, and then would get the budget they need to keep them permanently. So that's certainly an option as we go forward. And we talked a little bit about like a hybrid model where there's the climate team that has a lot of the expertise and is kind of holding the plan, responsible in a lot of ways for the plan and working with the external stakeholders. And we talked about roles and responsibilities of everybody in those meetings and what ours are versus others. So, I think we're pretty clear on that for now. And then, yeah, we're really happy to always consider what business units are looking for. So it's really up to them whether they think they need a permanent resource within their ranks for something, or if they would like to just borrow capacity from us should we have it available, or if we needed to do some type of temporary position. Something like the on-site energy manager is a really great kind of model where Dave Brushett is actually an employee of Efficiency Nova Scotia, but we have like a multi-year contract, and he basically pays for himself with all the savings. So there's lots of ways to think about getting those resources. But yeah, I think in terms of the 25 FTEs, those are full. Like some of them in the we have like a big large breakdown, and some are like it's not necessarily a full position to do that. It's like a quarter of an FTE to do this, or a half of an FTE to drive this project. So it would be a person that does that plus other things. So we kind of did it that way, a little bit more granularly. And I think the 100,000 earmark was just kind of what finance decided to do based on other existing positions, and that's the full cost. So it's not just salary, but the full cost of having an employee throughout their career at HRM. I can leave that to finance if they have any more details on that.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Is there anybody else that wish to comment on that one? Okay. Shannon, you done? Councillor Daigle-Gammon?
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Shannon. CIO, your hand is still up on the, I'm assuming maybe that's from the last time? Okay. Councillor Russell.
Thank you very much. One of the things that we have seen over the past 5 years is the population of Halifax growing by 2%. And if we project this forward over the next 40 years, the population of Halifax and the population of Nova Scotia are going to double. So far, the only impediment that we've seen to that is housing, because of the super tight housing market that we've got right now. That may not make us as marketable. What I'm wondering is, are all of the projections that we've seen about the climate activity, about how much we will be reducing the greenhouse gases and moving to alternate sources and things like that, do they incorporate this type of population growth? And can you guess, crystal ball time, of course, can you guess how much the population growth might impact those, therefore might impact the cost of Halifax and might impact the rest of the budget for the next however many years?
Mr. Mayor, through you to the councillor. That's a really good question. The energy and emissions modeling work that was done incorporated population growth. We worked with the regional planning team and the integrated mobility team to make sure that we were using the most up-to-date population projection. Now that was done a couple of years ago. So if there's a very large discrepancy from those numbers, we can always look at that, but it did incorporate that in terms of emissions over time and building stock and transportation and all of those pieces. So I guess, if we're thinking about population growth, then there are, lots of sides to thinking about that in terms of more money to do things with, because those people are in our city and paying those taxes and whatnot, but also the emissions associated with that growth. So all the more reason to grow as intelligently as we can, to be densifying, to be really working on our mode share and our modal splits and things like that.
Okay, thank you. Because as we do grow, we have a finite amount of space, and it will increase pressure, certainly in core Halifax, and then it goes out. We're targeting reducing municipal operations emissions and community-wide emissions, and we're doing this as a municipal unit. I'm wondering what we're doing other than things like education to actually compel the rest of the community to also have the emissions reductions. Is there anything that we can force them to do? Is there any influence that we would have over the provincial and federal governments? Or are we just going to encourage them and educate them?
Really excellent question. We've got lots to say on that, and I'm going to give some airtime to Kevin Boutlier, who's on the line, who's one of our clean energy specialists. Please.
Thanks, Shannon. And yeah, Kevin Boutlier, Clean Energy Specialist. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. Education is a key piece. We are working with our partners, the Clean Foundation, Efficiency Nova Scotia, other organizations who are experts in the education side. But we're also looking to lead by example. So an example of that would be in installing public electric vehicle chargers in areas that are lacking, so that private property owners can see that there are chargers in the area, and sort of make that change in their mind that, hey, there are chargers existing. I don't see a gas station, I see the EV charger, so I'm going to go for my next vehicle to be an EV. We're also working on a deep energy retrofit program for the community, for residential and for commercial buildings. So we have just issued an RFP to secure a study that would look into third-party financing. So look to the big banks, the big institutions, different investment groups to provide equitable financing to the community, both residential and commercial, so that they can perform deep energy retrofits. And also, we are working closely with the province, and we'll be encouraging them to adopt the new federal tiered code that is supposed to come out at the end of last year. It's been a bit delayed, but that federal tiered code is supposed to have net zero new buildings by 2025. We are working closely with the province on that, and we'll be encouraging them to adopt that as soon as possible.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Kevin. Kevin, I just have to comment, that's an awesome bow tie. We don't see enough bow ties. And I'm sure that there is a carbon saving having a bow tie instead of a straight tie. Mr. Mayor, if I'm out of 5 minutes, then please put me on the list to come back. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councillor Kent is okay. Councillor Cuttle.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And like my colleagues, I want to congratulate Shannon and all the staff who helped put this report together. It's a great snapshot. I love the way you've kind of put what's on track, what's coming, where we're missing the targets. It's easy to read, easy to track, and great job. Couple of things in here, and one is kind of, in setting this up, when you talked about how $1 saves $6 in adaptation, and when we're looking at energy, the 22 billion kind of translates into 42 billion in terms of savings, I guess, which is like a 1 to 2 ratio. And in that, I'm really interested if in the projects, like I know they're all important. We have the ones that we're starting on. I know some are tied up in regulation, but I'm not getting a sense of where like the urgency or the priority is needed in responding to climate change. And I'm just wondering if there's some way to kind of build that into the core areas, so we can better understand from a decision-making perspective about where we really need to be investing dollars. I don't know if there's some kind of way of assessing, the return on investment, to say like, we can't do this all in one go. There's priorities around an urgency around certain actions, and that, like if you look at something like sea level rise, it's inevitable, it's coming. And then there's also this return on investment piece. And I'm just wondering if some of those metrics can be incorporated into future reporting to help with our decision making. So we know if in a particular year we have X amount of dollars, where we're going to get the most bang for our buck in terms of our investment in Halifax and addressing kind of the urgent matters and urgent issues. And, so kind of on that note, I'm looking, when I look at the core areas, I see that 4 of the 7 are really focused on emissions and 2 are focused on the adaptation piece. And I'm just wondering about kind of the balancing of the priorities there, particularly when we know around our coastal communities and as a coastal municipality, as a place with a lot of lakes and rivers and watercourses, that we have some real physical challenges that we're going to have to face in terms of the way they're going to impact our communities, our city, and our infrastructure. If there's anything you can speak to about that, that would be great. So those are kind of just where my thoughts are going when reading this, and there's a lot of meat in here, and I greatly appreciate that now we kind of have it all laid out for us in a way with some greater detail. Particularly excited about how you're looking at the shared accountability across the business units. That's fantastic, and identified what the full-time rules are going to be and why they're needed. That's all really fantastic information. And back to the kind of the public part on this, when we think about $1 today saves 6 in the future, what this is saying is that this work is inevitable. We're going to have to do this work, and when we talk about the costs, it's not going to get cheaper for us, and we have to start investing now. So I appreciate the way in which you have framed some of this in terms of the funding, but really I'm just asking about again that return on investment, priority, and urgency.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to the councillor. That's a really good question, and we understand that council has decisions to make from multiple lenses and balancing all the priorities. So I fully respect the hard decisions that you have to make. The way the modeling and the plan was done was not at all looking at restrictions around money or people or legislation. It was like, this is what we physically need to reduce on the mitigation side by 2030, by 2027, by 2050, if we're going to actually get to that target, which we really hope everyone is trying to get to globally, so that we can stave off some of these really bad impacts, right? And the take-home message from the consultant was that all of these actions actually play together from a temporal and a spatial perspective over time. And you can't just pick and choose, unfortunately, if you want to get to those targets. It's really about doing them all, which is really scary and really hard to kind of process and figure out. So that's why, we said, okay, we're going to try and do everything all at once as best as we can, but like, how do we actually plan for that? So we did those 7 core areas to try and say, okay, like, we're building on this and we're bringing everyone with us, hopefully all our stakeholders as well, having the same types of conversations and decisions that they have to make. But it's really on the mitigation side about trying to drive down so quickly by doing all of these things, getting all these things going as quickly as possible. Where there is some ability to prioritize, looking at different considerations seems a little more easy is on the adaptation side, because we can do a risk and vulnerability assessment of our infrastructure, our communities, and see where are we most at risk, where are all the places we're at risk, where are we most at risk. And then with the money that we have baked into the capital plan for climate, there's like 3 big chunks on the capital side. One of them is, so 2 of them are on mitigation, our buildings and our electric vehicles. And then the third is on that critical infrastructure and safeguarding our infrastructure and our communities over time. And so we've put money in the 10-year capital plan to really start getting going on that. But the way that we prioritize those decisions, that is work that still needs to be done in terms of staff even bringing forward recommendations for council to consider. But, just my perspective would be that we would look at, physically, what is the most at risk, what is likely to get hit first in the next hurricane or whatnot, and then where are most vulnerable in that, like we can just layer the lenses. What is the most equitable decision from a social perspective, what makes sense from an economic perspective, and then also layering in our recapitalization, right? Like our roads crew are, so much of the work is on recap. So, we don't want to be undoing work that was just done. So when we know we have a failing piece of infrastructure that needs some work done on it already, can we capitalize on the opportunity and build in that climate resiliency? So that's kind of what we're proposing makes sense. Even on the building side, like the energy roadmap that's being done is looking at, okay, well, what buildings need a new roof in the next 5 years anyways? What ones are in a state where we're about to act on them? And then let's layer in kind of the call to make it net zero if possible, and add in solar and do all that work as one big package. So we're trying to be as efficient as we can and as prudent as we can with the dollars, and provide that information to council in a way that you're going to be able to have those conversations and make those decisions.
Thank you, Shannon. That was an excellent answer to those questions. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor. Just on the list, colleagues, I have Councillors Morse and Stoddard and Hensby for the first time, Councillor Austin and Deputy Mayor for a second time. Councillor Morse.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Shannon and team, for a fantastic presentation and all the amazing work that you've done over the last few years to get us to this point. I'm just looking for your perspective on how critical this budget is, if you can. What the key benefits are of us maintaining the momentum that we have and building on it, or what the cost would be if we delay or underfund your ask. And also, if you could comment on what impact it will have when the provincial government comes forward with their climate strategy, which is going to happen this spring. Thank you.
Go ahead,
Mayor,
Sharon.
for you to the councillor. Sorry, I just totally blanked on your question. I'm really sorry. Can you say it one more time?
That's okay. It's just about the timing of this budget. My sense is that we're at a very critical juncture, that this budget is very important in terms of maintaining momentum. And I'm just looking for what you see as the benefits of maintaining that momentum, the key ones, and what would be the key costs if we delay. And also just the context is going to be that the provincial government is coming in with their climate strategy as well around the same time that we'll be making these budget decisions.
Apologies for that. I think I need another cup of coffee. As soon as you said it, I remembered everything you said. Yes. So in terms, our ask in the grand total for operating and capital for the climate plan next year is just under $12 million. And it's to move on those three big capital strategic initiatives and to build in those 8 new positions and to have a bit more on the operating side for some consulting and design work. Like that's the ask for next year. And, that's what we've concluded based on where we are, based on the report card and based on what we've heard from the different departments. So, and, we're in the same position as every other city and every other government everywhere around this, where everyone's trying really hard to take their plan from being a plan to actually delivering on the objectives, like not just starting to move, not just doing a pilot project, but like driving down tonnage of emissions and really bracing for impact. And everyone is struggling with the same kinds of questions on how to self-organize around it, how to get the buy-in, how to get the support, and how to get the money. So, from our perspective, we desperately need that money and those people to just keep on going. And I think it's really important because, we are city government, but we are really the face and the lead of this plan, and we are just building that support over time with our stakeholders. And there are a ton of stakeholders doing so much work, obviously, in this space, like Efficiency Nova Scotia, like the provincial government, like our utility, right? Like there's tons of stuff happening. It's such a busy space in the recent years that it's almost like, okay, wait, we have to make sure there's not any overlap. How are we being efficient across organizations? We don't want to be doing the same thing or competing for funding, that type of thing, right? So there's so many logistics to it. It's really tricky. We're really excited for the province to release their full, regulations for their climate plan, the climate plan, and then kind of some of the details of the act that was passed. And we have submitted formally as a city government to the province with what we see as being the critical things for them to do to enable Halifax to succeed and collectively Nova Scotia to succeed. So they know what we're looking for, and we hope to see it in their climate plan.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Stoddart.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Shannon, and congratulations. I appreciate the layout of the report. I'm a very visual person as well, so it was very friendly to me. And I want to thank you and your staff as well. I just have two questions. For those that won't go directly or are not able to go directly to electric, how do we feel about hybrids as a starting point? And my other question is, are there any Nova Scotia rebates available to residents at this time, or is that something that will come in the future? Thank you.
Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the councillor. I will kick this one to Kevin Boutlier, please.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon, and thanks for the question, Councillor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Councillor. There are rebates for electric vehicles here in Nova Scotia. It's a $3,000 rebate for a new electric vehicle and a $2,000 for a used electric vehicle. That $2,000 for used, I think, is fantastic because there's a misconception that to go for an electric vehicle, it is a $100,000 Tesla. But that's not the case. There's actually a number of used electric vehicles that still have a suitable range for the average driver here in Nova Scotia. So I think that's a fantastic initiative. There's also a $5,000 rebate through the federal government. So folks here that do go for a new electric vehicle can get up to $8,000. In addition to that, each municipality or business organization can also obtain 10 $8,000 rebates per year. So when we look at our fleet transition, there's a potential of $80,000 per year. With regards to hybrid, it was a great choice maybe 5 years ago, but the cost of electric vehicles are actually coming down, that in just maybe a year or two, they're going to be the same price or cheaper than a hybrid. So it really makes more financial sense to go direct from the internal combustion now to an electric, or at a minimum, a plug-in hybrid. So a hybrid is not plug-in. A hybrid has a small battery that you get, not many kilometers on the charge, and then it goes to gas. However, a plug-in hybrid does have a larger capacity battery, and for a lot of people here in Nova Scotia, I think the average daily driving distance is about 30 kilometers, which means they'll actually be on that battery the entire time. So yeah, plug-in hybrid would be the closest to hybrid that we would recommend. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Councillor Hensby.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Quite an extensive report. Talk about all the various action plans and issues that are in it. And I'd like to see a simpler checklist of all these 30 projects we're talking in progress. I'd like to have line by line by line just where they're at and who's doing what with them. So I got to have a better appreciation of the magnitude of all the endeavors that are being undertaken. My concern going through the whole report was, what is the impact on rural Halifax? I'm glad to see the talk about backup generators in the fire stations in our community centers, but those backup generators, still be diesel fueled, or will they be propane fueled, or will they going to be expected to be solar powered? So I want to make sure that the backup generating capacity still be there for a period of time. I see we have made an application to the federal government's $1 million matching fund. Hopefully, when we expect any word on that application, because if we need EV charges, we need a network of them across rural Halifax. You know, they can't be all downtown and suburbia. They need to be across the HRM region. If you want any capacity to serve beyond the downtown, we want to make sure that electric vehicles can get out to Ecum, Seacum, and Hubbardston, and up to Middle Musquodoboit and Upper Musquodoboit. So I want to make sure the EV charging networks are going to be well distributed across the municipality. And also talk about in the report, talk about expansion of transit. Well, I believe that means the express transit roads on our 100 series highways need to go beyond the current boundary line. So Highway 101, 102, 103, 107 need to see those more park and ride terminal services than we currently have. Nova Scotia Power, how much dialogue we've been having with them to see what kind of capacity they have to meet these goals and aspirations that we have. They have a lot of aged infrastructure. A lot of wire is going to have to either be upgraded to three-phase power in certain areas, or even just replaced. And there's miles and miles and kilometers of wires that may need to be upgraded. So where is Nova Scotia Power in their capacity to meet the aims and objectives of this plan? And my other question in regards to coastal adaptation, are we getting into provincial realm of responsibility here? Because a lot of these breaches in the beaches and stuff and coastal erosion and storm surge issues, a lot of it's provincial in regards to responding to the coastline. Is it our jurisdiction of coastal repair or coastal plans to build up certain retention walls? I know we've done that down in Cal Bay to protect the road there, but the province is doing it over at Lawrencetown for the beach area. So I want to know, where is our municipal responsibility to coastal adaptation? Where do we draw that line in the sand at from HRM versus the province? And my last question is about wildfire. You talk about wildfire issues and stuff. Well, we've always still had a problem of hurricane debris, Hurricane Juan material still lying around. We still have areas where you can't clearly walk through the woods to try to fight fire. So if we have any significant hurricane blowdown areas, there should be some kind of a fire-wise approach to try to minimize the impact of this material becoming a fuel source for fires. And you mentioned about the Tangier School. Have we finally received title to the Tangier School, and what aspirations we have to do with that? Because there's opportunities for either to convert into a seniors housing apartment building. There's also a gold mine across the street looking for perhaps more infrastructure as perhaps a dormitory for their workers and stuff. So I want to know what we're going to do with that asset. The last question people are worried about is the decarbonization. What does that mean for a future fuel source, as is firewood? I see Councillor Russell's got a nice fire burning in the back of his background there, and I said, is this a climate change comment about burning carbon and stuff? So I just got curious, because some people are worried about this plan. Is it going to affect availability and use of firewood for personal heating sources for rural areas? Those are my questions at this particular time, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for the number of questions, the last three of which were the last question. So thank you for that. Shannon, did you get some of those?
Yeah, I took notes this time. Mr. Mayor, through you to the councillor. I'm going to have Kevin answer you on EV and NSP, and Sam will speak to the coastal adaptation piece. That's really being all sorted through Coastal Protection Act. In terms of wildfires, a lot of what we have been working with partners on is the residential and wildland kind of urban interface, and where there's fire risk to full communities that kind of encroach upon wildlands. But that's a good point about the blowdown, and I'm sure that our urban forester has things to say about that, so we can circle back to you. I know that from an ecological perspective, when there is damage to a forest, it's important to keep some debris on the forest floor so that nutrients can be reabsorbed and it can be part of the ecosystem going forward. But I know that there are a lot of fire considerations around that. So that's a really good point. And I can't speak to the title of Tangier School, so I'll have to get back to you on that as well. So I'll kick it over to Kevin to talk about our EV strategy implementation and Nova Scotia Power, please.
Kevin.
Thanks, Shannon. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. The EV strategy. So yes, we did submit an application to the federal ZEBIT program. We're hoping to hear back by the end of December, but that's now been pushed to the end of this month. Whether or not we're successful on that, we will be proceeding using our current budget. We had put aside $1 million and we're hoping for a matching of another $1 million. What we would do if we were unsuccessful would be to still focus on the rural fast chargers. So throughout the municipality, there are plans currently in the next year to do fast chargers at J.D. Shatford Memorial Library, Musquodoboit Harbor Public Library, Fire Station 38 in Middle Musquodoboit, Cole Harbor Place Axel Sports Stadium, the new Sheet Harbor Recreation Center, and the St. Margaret's Center. So we would still focus on getting those designed and installed, and then it's public now. The Clean Foundation was actually successful through previous years' ZEBIT funding application, where they're acting as a third-party administrator for level 2 charging stations. So like I said, if we are unsuccessful in our application, we would proceed with our budget with the fast chargers and then look to work with the Clean Foundation to install the level 2s all throughout the municipality. A quick point on the backup generators. I believe there was a question there. We are looking to do propane, but also in the next coming years, we would like to look at using larger trucks, electric trucks like the Ford Lightning and so forth with our fleet when we do make that transition, and actually use those as backup generators in times of power outages. With regards to Nova Scotia Power, we were a key stakeholder in their integrated resource plan development, and they were a key stakeholder in our Halifax plan development. With the new government committing to a 2030 retirement of coal, Nova Scotia Power is working to determine the infrastructure that is needed to incorporate new technologies. They do have Muskrat Falls, which is now online and working, and they're also looking into the Atlantic Loop with Quebec and others. There's a Green Choice program that is looking at building several megawatts of wind that would be more distributed renewable energy or new energy. And then finally, when we look at the Halifax analysis, there is a fair bit of energy reduction as well. Yes, we are transitioning from coal or from fuel oil to electricity. However, we are making our homes and our businesses more efficient. So the actual reduction actually ends up turning the energy need actually stays level. So the increase in generation won't be, won't actually be an issue. I believe that answers, hopefully, those questions relating to the energy side of things. And we'll toss it over to Sam.
Thanks, Kevin. And thanks, Mr. Mayor, through you to the councillor. I'm really excited, actually, Councillor Hensby, to hear you asking about coastal adaptation on the Eastern Shore, because that's where I live. And I'm very aware of how important it is and how much it's impacted, especially by sea level rise and extreme water levels. So there's a lot of information. The kind of jurisdiction of the coast is very, very complex. So we do have the federal feds involved. There are also like the provinces involved, and then we also have municipal jurisdiction as well. So basically, where the province, the provincial jurisdiction moves to the municipal jurisdiction is at the high water mark. So basically, at like your highest tide. From there landward is where the municipality really comes into play. And then of course it gets more complicated when you look at which roads are the responsibility of the province versus the municipality. And then also some beaches come under the provincial jurisdiction under the Beaches Act. So it can get quite complex. And I think that's why there might be some, you seeing some projects such as the one in Cow Bay where the municipality was involved, and then some other ones where maybe the provincial government is involved. I want to kind of bring into this conversation the new Coastal Protection Act that was passed by the province, and they're kind of working on the regulations right now. We had an extensive document that we submitted on submission on what we thought was good and what we also wanted to see changed as they flesh out the regulations. But that will essentially be implemented into our municipal planning processes and permitting. And that will affect both like where, what the vertical setbacks are. It will deal with erosion mitigation. It will also look at ensuring that residential buildings are built high enough above projected sea level rise. And it will also influence kind of the shoreline protection structures that you're talking about, which will still be processed through the provincial government as they currently are, because they're below the high water mark, but will definitely be influenced by kind of our municipal planning processes as well. I think that answers your question, but please let me know if you have any other questions related to that.
I appreciate the response from all three, but I still haven't heard nothing about the expansion of the express transit on the 100 series highways beyond their service boundaries now.
I don't know, Shannon, that you can answer that. That would be more of a Dave Regie question, I expect.
Yeah, apologies. I'm not sure on that one.
Okay. Thank you. I think everybody who wants to speak the first time has spoken. I'm going to just make a couple of comments and then we'll go to second time round. It's around noon. I think we'll keep going for the time being, if everybody's okay with that. If anybody has a violent objection, let me know.
Well, Mr. Mayor, there was one comment about firewood itself. I didn't see a response to the firewood question. Will people still be allowed to have fire for their fuel source at home?
Shannon, you got a yes or no on that?
Mr. Murphy, to the councilor, the plan doesn't, automatically ban anything like burning firewood, and we're kind of silent on that one right now. It's perfectly fine for people to be continuing to burn their wood if that's their source of fuel right now. We don't as a team have a strong opinion on that at the moment. I know the provincial government has perspectives, and ultimately, as we electrify, we will be lessening probably our use of wood for building heating, but that's all I got.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you, Councillor Hensby. I had called our bylaw folks to go to Councillor Russell's house and arrest him, but I'm going to call that off in the short term. I want to, Councillor Russell mentioned the growing population, the demands that puts on the environment. I think it also provides an opportunity for us. Shannon, as you'll know, a number of the new companies that are coming to Halifax are innovation and tech companies, and a number of them are actually working on green solutions and can be very helpful. Some of them you would have met at the Mayor's Roundtable on a green economy. So I think there's some positives that come with that. I want to just talk, Shannon, I know that people think about actions a city or a province can take on climate, and they think about things like buses and fleet and buildings. I don't know that everybody understands the whole role that nature-based solutions can actually play in hitting our climate goals. I think the IPCC said in excess of 35% of climate goals can be achieved through nature-based solutions. One of the things that did come out of the COP meeting in Glasgow was a commitment to end deforestation by, I think, 2030. So I think the nature-based solutions piece is something we're well positioned to deal with, the ecosystems and trees and all the things that contribute to that. I'll ask you to comment on that. I'll make one other comment, and that is that we may need to be nimble in terms of what other orders of government come up with plans for. If all of a sudden there's an acceleration of funding for green transit, we may have to adjust more quickly, but I know that we can do that. And the last thing I'd say is I can't help but think of former Councillor Zarowski. He was the one that brought the motion to council some time ago that we declare a climate emergency. And I know some councillors kind of thought, really, do we need to do that? It passed unanimously. It was an important statement. And I think Councillor Zarowski had done a lot in terms of pushing us along. So I want to just commend him. Not that he pays attention to council anymore. Just nature-based solutions. Can you just say very briefly, Shannon, on what the potential is for us achieving our goals through what we call nature-based solutions?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that's a really good point. That is something that I think we're actually really well positioned to focus on here in Halifax, because we benefit from such a vast amount and diversity of wild spaces. And I think that's why council approved, the development of the Green Network Plan, because that's really supposed to show us, okay, what is the state of the landscape? Where are those really valuable ecosystems or corridors, migratory routes? Where are the pinch points? What do we need to focus on first to really maintain as much ecosystem health and integrity across our community as we can? So I think it's really important for us to keep close attention on the Green Network Plan, and we're working internally on really resourcing that and striking a bit of a cross-departmental working group on that. And really happy that's, the nature-based climate solutions conversation is one of the reasons why one of the new staff positions that we chose to make out of the funding that we got for this year was an environment specialist, and is Emma from Ducks Unlimited, because we really wanted some expertise internally around conservation, wetlands, the importance of nature. So nature is important. So there's a couple things. One is we want to keep healthy what is healthy. The percentage of wetlands remaining in Canada is really depressing. I think it's under 2%. Here, we've lost a lot of wetlands in our province. And what's the most shocking is that in HRM, all the times that we get wetlands destroyed, and then there's this wetland compensation component, those wetlands, if they're being constructed or whatever, it's almost always outside of our municipal boundary. So our ability to absorb and manage stormwater in extreme rainfall events and things like that is diminished because we don't have as much ability to absorb. And wetlands really do that for us. So trying to keep our wetlands and work with the province on, our ability to do that and keep those connections is really important. And the other thing I'd say is on adaptive management. So you talked about, needing to capitalize on opportunities. If a new big funding stream comes out, obviously we need to pay attention to that. And the whole climate plan is trying to be based on the principle of adaptive management and collective impact. And so that's why it's so hard to come up with really structured plans year over year, is because it's very hard to know in this space with everything changing so quickly, not just in terms of funding opportunities, but legislative change and policy change. We have to always be responding and adapting, and that's what we're trying to do. And I think we've done some good jobs on some of it so far. Thank you.
Thank you. As I mentioned to you before, Shannon, and as you would know, a mature silver maple can absorb 220 liters of water per hour, so much more dynamic and resilient than hard infrastructure. And I thank Megan Leslie. That's one of the learnings she taught me. Okay, so I have 4 speakers left at this point. I think we'll just keep going. If people need to take a break for lunch, you can show your opposition. I'm looking at you all on the screen. If not, we're going to keep going. Everybody's okay to keep going on this? We'll keep going on this. Councillor Austin, I think you had an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have an amendment. I'll just, before hitting on that, bravo for the trees. They're the best return on any infrastructure we can ever buy. It's but the only thing that we can put in that will actually improve in value year after year, rather than declining in value and coming to a point of replacement. So I very much appreciate that. I do have an amendment. I would like to move that the Committee of the Whole recommends to Regional Council that the Chief Administrative Officer be directed to include in their budget and business plan presentations what actions the business unit plan. Oops, this is a little bit mangled. Sorry, the clerk gave me a revised version. I move that Committee of the Whole recommends to Regional Council that the Chief Administrative Officer be directed to include in the budget and business plan presentations what actions the business units plans to undertake on Halifax and what gaps might still exist within each area of responsibility.
Second.
That's moved and seconded. And I know you had sent that around to us. Maybe we should put that in the chat as well. Either Councillor Austin or Ian, if possible.
I can fire it in the chat. The main thrust of this is we've got this nice breakdown by business unit of responsibilities now, and we're coming into budget and the different departments. I know it's a work in progress for many folks still. We've had that first kind of opening session this past year in terms of trying to mainstream the climate change plan out into the organization. And I know from a council perspective, I would very much appreciate as part of each budget presentation, a very clear explanation from each department what they're doing towards meeting the chunks of the plan that are their responsibility. Because it's something I want to follow up through budget, and I think would be useful for council.
Okay. That's been moved and seconded. Just for those who don't have access to our chat line, the motion is that Committee of the Whole recommends the Budget Committee that all business units include in their budget and business plan presentations what actions their business unit plans to undertake on Halifax, what gaps might still exist within their area of responsibility. Councillor Russell.
Thank you very much. I like the motion. I'm going to be supporting it. Just curious how we get this message to Halifax Water. How we direct them to do the same thing. That's it.
Thank you. No, I don't think Halifax Water is with us, but that message can be brought to them. Councillor Cuddle.
Thank you. As a water commissioner, I'm happy to ask that question. They do have a climate plan, so I think it's a matter of sharing it. I completely support this motion. I think it's a good one. It's actually something in the lines of something similar I've spoken to Jacques about not just this strategy and how the business units are meeting it, but all the strategies. We just got this great big list of all the strategic initiatives within the municipality, the priorities and the outcomes. Yet we don't always see the connection between what the business units are doing and how it's delivering on these strategies. And in real strategic work, it's not about taking on a strategy in a silo. It's about adopting the strategies within the work we do day to day. And so I'm going to support this motion, but I would also like more information about all the strategic initiatives, whether it's the integrated mobility plan, whether it's, a climate risk management or accessibility strategy, to have a better way of looking at the work we do on a day-to-day basis and understand how that work is collectively moving us forward to meet our strategic initiatives. So I thank Councillor Austin for bringing this motion forward. It's a good one, and I think we need to do this and we need to do more.
Thank you. Councillor Russell has spoken. Councillor Cuddle. Councillor Deputy Mayor.
Thank you so much. Thanks for this motion. This is excellent. So I fully support it. And I think it also, raises the point as Councillor Cuddle just mentioned, we don't see the connections, and neither does the public. And at the last Environmental Sustainability Committee meeting, when we had this presentation, it was very clear that the deficit is in the communications and the lack of a PR plan to the public, and really understanding, hang on, what is Halifax? I've never heard about it. We saw that in the survey results. People don't know what this is. And so, while I recognize that this is an internal looking motion, I also think there may be an opportunity here for us to think think a little bit more about how we can communicate this outside of our own little bubble, because it is huge. So I'm just wondering, Shannon, if you can speak a little bit to that, because you did hear and see a lot of the discussions post that meeting, as to how we actually, get the word out of all the great work the team is doing and the integration with the business plans and how this is embedded in the work that we do every single day. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, through you to the councillor. Yeah, good point. And since that meeting, we have had some really great conversations with our corporate communications team, and they have come up with some kind of short-term strategy that's going to help to inform like a longer-term rollout around communicating the climate plan over time. So looking forward to working with them on that for sure. And then we're still working on kind of the community and public facing engagement as well as education. And one of the positions that we're about to recruit for is an engagement specialist focused on climate. So we're really excited about getting some capacity and getting going on working on that messaging because it's critical. I agree with you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I was a little distracted. It looked like Councillor Mason was fishing when he got up and in his background there, but I guess he's back. Hope you caught something.
The mackerel are running, sir.
All right, ready for the question on the motion of Councillor Austin as seconded by Councillor Mason. Are we ready for the question?
Question.
Sorry, just 1 second. Sorry, before we do that, I do see Councillor Blackwood has his hand up. Jerry, did you have something on this?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I appreciate the motion by Councillor Austin. The business plans that you'll be seeing in the near future, each business unit has a slide in their presentation about Halifax and their actions and their what they're going to be doing to support either support the Halifax go forward or specific actions around capital delivery. So that will be coming forward. That work is in place. And to Councillor Cuddle's question just on strategic priorities and deliveries, that will be part of the presentations as well.
Thank you, Jerry. Okay, ready for the question.
Question.
Beginning with District 14, Councillor Blackburn.
Voting yes on the motion.
15, Councillor Russell.
In favor?
16, Councillor Otis.
Voting yes.
Mayor Savage.
In support.
1, Councillor Daigle-Gammon.
Voting in favor of the motion.
2, Councillor Hensby.
Affirmative.
3, Councillor Kent.
In favor.
4, Councillor Purdy.
Yes.
5, Councillor Austin.
In favor.
6, Councillor Mancini.
Voting in favor of the motion.
7, Councillor Mason.
For the motion.
8, Councillor Smith. 4. 9, Councillor Clary.
Yes.
10, Councillor Morse.
In favor.
11, Councillor Cuddle.
In favor.
12, Councillor Stoddard.
In favor of the amendment?
And Deputy Mayor Lovelace.
Voting yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's our second motion that's passed, amended motion. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you so much. I was going to talk about communications, but I already did that. So I'm going to talk about the water table. Because I think that this might be a gap that we need to get addressed. Certainly working with Halifax Water is awesome. We are, as Councillor Cuddle just mentioned, at the board level, very clearly focused on climate change issues, expanding and working hard with regards to stormwater pipe services and so on. But what we don't see here is an effort to assist those folks who have experienced potable water quality issues And, maybe this is an unintended consequence of the work that we've been doing in the stormwater mitigation. We can see that the diversion and the collection of stormwater away from the water table can potentially be causing issues, especially for dug wells, especially for wells that are along the coastline. And, in thinking about ways that certainly we can look to address the wetland problem as far as being outside that core area and the wetland mitigation with regards to development. Definitely we've identified that. We know that's an issue. But what I don't see is the work that we need to do with the province and potentially federal government on not only identification and mapping of the water table, especially along the coastline, but recognizing that, these folks can't drill if they're close to seawater. But that is just not even a possibility because then the issues over the entire neighborhood and over that entire water table become, quite intense. So I'm just wondering, Shannon, if you can speak a little bit about how do we get to that point where we're able to address the water table for those rural areas? Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, through you to the councillor, excellent question. And you probably saw that on the accountability side of that report card that Halifax Water is the lead because we chose to select one single lead for each of the actions, even though, it doesn't always work cleanly because some of the actions being very multifaceted, complex, long-term, there's ultimately multiple leaders, right? So within the serviceable boundary, yes, it makes sense that Halifax Water is the leader. Outside, it does not, because that's not within their jurisdiction. We 100% know that and understand that. And the actual Halifax climate plan itself within those actions about a sustainable water supply going forward, talk about groundwater and well water and jurisdictional issues. So yes, provincially groundwater is in their wheelhouse. And I know that a couple things. One, they're doing a big kind of risk assessment around adaptation for the whole province right now, and they're focused on different sectors. And I'm hoping that is going to help it's going to help them. They're doing it because they want to kind of know where to focus their attention and prioritize on responding to current and future risks around climate. So they're looking at food security, like the agricultural sector. They're looking at all these different pieces. We're not really a part of that, work, but we've been told that it's happening, and it's I think it's nearing its conclusion. So it'd be interesting to see if groundwater is part of that in terms of both drinking supply, just generally with the water table, but also saltwater intrusion. And I think when we do our hazard mapping, starting with the coastal flooding and overland flooding piece, that's going to be an important part of what comes out of that. Where along the coast do we have drinking groundwater wells, and are they at risk for that saltwater intrusion, especially as sea level is rising? And then what are the options going forward on that? And that requires some collaboration with the province and with others for sure. But that is on our radar. But you're right in that we haven't moved on that since the plan went forward.
Is there anything that we can do to get this included in that provincial risk assessment process?
I'm happy to reach out and see if it is. I think it's been underway for a couple of years now. So basically, fingers crossed, and I will circle back with an answer on that.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Councillor Russell.
Thank you very much. I've got a number of questions, so I have no problem coming back if my time is too long. The first one relates to battery technology. The first one relates to the 46 items on the to-do list, and I'm wondering, as we move forward with this list, do we expect it to change, and how much do we expect it to change? Probably grow, and do we expect the items to be to become more complex. Has that type of thing been allowed for, or is this the set list, and does it form a finite project?
Mr. Yar, for you to the councillor, that's a good question. It's not fixed and finite. Based on that adaptive management approach, I think we're going to do what we need to do and respond to what we need to respond to over time. And it's hard for us to predict what the climate and energy landscape is going to look like, even in 2 years or 5 years. So the idea is to be flexible, for it to make sense what we're doing and what we're investing in, for sure. Those 46 actions were our kind of way to organize what we think we need to do in the collective to hit these targets. So I would say that there's flexibility around that going forward.
Okay, so the 3% that we've been asked for 10 years has a huge potential to change. Is that correct? Or is that better asked of Jerry or Bruce?
Ms. Murphy, to the councillor, I would just say that I don't know that that's the same. Maybe I'm not thinking of it in the right way, but I'm saying that we could potentially have to add actions to the climate plan or morph actions based on what happens, right? Based on what kind of impacts we face and things over time. Yeah, if your question is around, do we need to sustain a 3% tax for this, then I will put that to finance. Thank you.
Councillor, would you mind repeating your question, please?
So the question is essentially, we have a 46 item list of things to do for Halifax, and how much might that evolve over the past or over the next while, and what impact would that have on the end date and the total percent, 3% over 10 years? How much might that change? And I suppose it's not a how much, but it's how much is it at risk of changing and being extended.
Okay, so what we have, first of all, is we have a 3% climate, 3% increase in the average tax bill, which is basically to create the contributions which will go into the Strategic Initiative Reserve. So that is what we are calling the climate action tax. The assumption is made is that those contributions will continue for 10 years, and those will go into the reserve. And it may take us some time to pay off that debt, depending on when the debentures are actually issued. When we look at the specific capital projects, you do have a number of issues with any capital projects, which would relate to, the final design scope, the inflationary pressure on the costs, those sorts of things, and the timing issues. So those sorts of things are the risks you face in terms of cost increase. That's no different from most capital projects. Some of these are a little bit farther out in terms of their time. So if we were in a situation where those costs rose, the quickest and easiest way to deal with that would be to extend the time of the climate action tax so that it goes, instead of going from 10 years, it goes past to 10 years in order to pay off the debt costs that are involved. In terms of what a future council would do in terms of adding projects, changing the amount of the tax, that's really a little bit more in terms of speculation.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there. Councillor Russell, if you want to come back, you can come back. I've got Councillor Cuttle next.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Cuttle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so I was, it's great to see that the Solar City program is being reconsidered around, through an equity lens. I'm just wondering, like now with the regional plan review, when we start to look at these different models of how we do a community-based solar program, is there a need or an opportunity through the regional plan review to start to build this into some of our land use planning bylaws or into our plans, our community plans? Or what are the steps that are being taken in regards to this this change into the Solar City program?
Shannon.
Mayor, through to the councilor, that's a good question. In terms of the changes with the Solar City program, it's not so much on the planning consideration side. It's the incentive program that we're trying to launch to encourage building owners, starting with residential, but really we'd like it to be across all building stock, to encourage building owners to make the decision and to enable them to make the decision to do a deep energy retrofit on their building, to reduce their energy demand by at least half, to put renewables on if it's possible to do so, and to also look at climate risks like maybe flood prevention and things like that as part of a package. So it's more about retrofitting the actual building. That's going from so right now we have Solar City. It will be up to council on whether we continue with Solar City and also do this deep energy retrofit program, or potentially bundle it in, because one of the things that's happening is that people are choosing to and investing in installing solar on their homes, where it wouldn't take necessarily too much more to get them all the way to that deep energy place that we need them to be, because the single biggest area of emissions that we have to drive down is on our existing buildings. And putting solar panels on a house that doesn't have adequate insulation, that hasn't switched from fuel to electricity, doesn't get us where we need to be in time at all. So the big nut we're trying to crack, which is the same as what everyone is trying to do across the country and globally, really, is how do we get to that sound financial business case, layering in all the other considerations that a person will make in making a choice like that to get to those deep energy retrofits. So the pilot is about using a bit of a navigator approach, where there's a person that really guides an interested participant through, so that you layer in every single rebate and funding opportunity that's available for the work. And the contractors are kind of on a trade network, and we're working really closely with Efficiency Nova Scotia in setting this up for the pilot. So that's what that work is. But on the shared solar side of things, we're waiting on the legislation, the regulations to be drafted from the Green Choice Program, which would enable community shared solar. And we're really excited about that. I don't know if, Kevin, you had anything you wanted to add in on that?
Yes. So with the shared solar through the legislation with the province, we are hoping that it is opened up so there is virtual net metering. So currently, Nova Scotia Power, we have the net metering program, which is an incredible program, one of the best here in Canada, and it allows property owners to generate electricity with the solar energy system and offset the consumption in their home. If it is generating and they are at work and they don't need that electricity, it goes to Nova Scotia Power, and Nova Scotia Power pays you a credit. The one issue with that program is you have to own a home, and you can only generate as much as you historically consume in that home. So if the shared solar program through the province goes through and legislation is changed and virtual net metering is enacted, and then those limitations are not in place. So you can have a large farm and you can fill that up with solar and generate more than what that one account would need, and allow people that don't have access to solar, either they own a home and their roof is not good for solar, or they rent and they do not own a home, they will be able to access that solar in a community solar garden. We see that coming down the pipeline. Our fine planner, Matt Conlon, is working very closely with the regional plan review and ensuring that the proper planning processes and setbacks and so forth are being considered, so that we do have suitable community solar lands here in HRM, and that people do want to develop it. They don't have to jump through too many hoops, and we make it easy for them to do so.
Great. I'm really glad to hear that that there is somebody working with planning staff around this, because when I look at how much money and financing we're committing to the Solar City program, putting solar on people's roofs, where they invest this money and then a tall building gets built next to their house and the investment is lost. I mean, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that it's only going to private homeowners who are benefiting from the savings on a government funded program without it being accessible, across different types of home occupancy choices, I think is problematic. And so I am really looking forward to seeing where this goes next, and I'm following it closely. So thank you, Kevin.
Thank you very much, Councillor Russell.
Thank you very much. And I don't see anybody else listed, so I'm just going to keep on going until you pull out the big cane and pull me off stage. The next question is related to batteries. The actions for decarbonizing transportation, there are 3 actions for that, and 2 of which are related to electric vehicles. And what I've seen is that electric vehicles are a Band-Aid measure. They're going to be short-lived, and they come at a high, at this point, a high financial cost. They also come at a high social cost. And I'm wondering if we are moving forward with implementing hydrogen, and when we might be able to do that on a fleet side of things. I don't think we'll be able to do that on a building side of things, but I don't know. I'm just wondering if you could speak to that for a couple of minutes.
Certainly. So through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. With regards to hydrogen, we have been in discussion with Heritage Gas quite a bit, and some other folks from across the country regarding the use of hydrogen. There is potential for hydrogen to be integrated into our natural gas grid and used for heating in our homes. With our natural gas grid, it is plastic piping, so it is very low porous, so the hydrogen actually can be integrated with natural gas. I believe it's up to 20%, and that can be used in our natural gas heating systems. That is probably 10 years out, I would say, before that becomes a reality. With regards to transportation, there is potential for hydrogen in the heavy duty transport, where fueling times are need to be quick. And there had been discussion with Halifax Transit, and I'll probably defer to Halifax Transit regarding the hydrogen use and the new facilities. With regards to batteries themselves in transportation, it is very cost effective for light duty fleets. The battery range is ever increasing every year. You're looking at some of the vehicles having 400 to 500 kilometer range currently on the battery, and Tesla and others are looking into the 1,000,000-mile battery. We have some incredible work being done here in Nova Scotia. Surratt up in Spring Hill is a leader in lead acid batteries for solar and off-grid. I'll get to the solar and off-grid storage in just a moment. But with regards to vehicle batteries, Jeff Dawn, a professor at Dalhousie University, is partnered with Tesla and is looking at developing a no cobalt battery. And mining cobalt is an issue for sustainable mining practices. With regards to recycling of the batteries, Lucas Swan at Dalhousie University in his lab is looking at repurposing used electric vehicle batteries and using them for off-grid storage. He's working on a research project regarding that. And finally, I guess that's mostly it. With regards to storage and batteries for homes, with the net metering program, it does not really make sense to use storage for a residential home. However, storage for off-grid, when you factor in the cost of installing telephone poles to get out to, not telephone poles, but power poles to get out to your property, it can be more cost effective to use battery storage. And hopefully that answers.
But that answers a lot of it. It raises a question. There was a Tesla battery a number of years ago that somebody could drop in their basement and basically use that to power their home. And you're saying that that is not terribly efficient?
It's efficient. It's just not cost effective currently. When you think of it, realistically, depending on where you live, to pay, say there was the Tesla Powerwall was called, I believe it was say $13,000 or so to install, and to have that sitting around. I know, I'm lucky. I'm in the city. My power goes out once a year. Even for maybe the more rural, the power does go out, but it's going out, when it's not sunny. It's going out at night. Currently, it's just not cost effective. Nova Scotia Power is doing pilots on battery storage because they do see that as a benefit to reducing their grid demand. But yeah, currently, it would not be cost effective for just the average homeowner.
Okay, thank you very much. So I see Dave Riggy has joined us. One of my other questions related to getting to hydrogen with transportation. So I'm just, go ahead.
Dave Riggy, go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon, Dave Riggy, Executive Director, Halifax Transit. Mr. Mayor, through you to the committee. So we're certainly interested in progressing to hydrogen for all the reasons the councillor has mentioned. And I would agree with the assessment that really the battery electric buses are a stopgap towards an ultimate solution, which is likely hydrogen. For us, we are in conversations with industry. The biggest thing for us right now is the availability of clean hydrogen, green hydrogen, and a reliable source of that. So that's really I would say right now the biggest obstacle to be overcome. The good thing is, as Kevin had mentioned, Heritage Gas is in here. There are some major players involved. So I am confident in time that will be solved. Within the transit industry, there is a bit of a move towards hydrogen now. The buses do exist. It really just does come down to that continuous source of green hydrogen, which has been the challenge to overcome. But absolutely something we are looking at in terms of the forward planning for our fleet.
Thank you very much. Yep, thank you. Looking at natural assets, including lakes and rivers. We're working to protect them. Stormwater is mentioned, but it's mentioned in terms of infrastructure and not about water quality at the end of the pipe going into our lakes and rivers. I'm wondering if you could speak to that and seeing what we could do to protect them. Wondering if we're looking at things like bylaw changes to so that the water course and wetland buffers might be increased. And the last question, I guess for now, I'll fire everything else through email, not that there's much, is are we looking to over-engineer things like culverts and stormwater systems to cover a 1 in 20 or a 1 in 100 flood? And does that include retrofitting our current culverts and stormwater systems to handle that?
Mr. Mayor, through you to the councillor. I can speak to the quality piece. I know that in the new Provincial Environment Act, they actually put in that they're going to develop quality guidelines for stormwater, which is something we've been wanting for a very long time. We're super excited about it. And our very own Cameron Dekoff, who is now not with HRM, but with Nova Scotia Environment and Climate Change, I think that's going to be part of his his work plan over the next at least year. So we're really excited that they are starting to dig in on quality, because that will then inform, how we regulate and enforce things over time. In terms of your kind of infrastructure engineering questions, I think maybe Peter Duncan would be best suited for that if he's on the line.
Peter?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, can you hear me okay? I'm having some technical difficulties here. So is everybody able to hear and see me okay?
Yes, we've got you.
Okay, just briefly, it's Peter Duncan, Director of Infrastructure Planning. And with regards to the stormwater design standards, we currently do account for the climate change impacts. We have an empirical peaking factor that we add to it now, and we're always looking at ways to increase that as our knowledge and understanding of the impacts of more frequent rain comes to bear. We're always reviewing our specs, but we do have a set of joint standards now with HRM and Halifax Water.
Thank you.
One question that was there was, are we looking at things like considering bylaw changes so that watercourse and wetland setbacks are considered or are increased?
Do you mean with regards to water quality?
Not water quality, just protecting them. So not having a building within 30 meters of watercourse or wetlands.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the council. Yeah, so as you know, we do have riparian zones and setbacks and watercourses now, and in the context of the regional plan, we will be reviewing those.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cuttle.
There we go. Sorry. My mute button keeps getting hidden. I just had a follow-up question to what Mr. Righi said around electric buses. I kind of missed part of that. I'm just wondering about, you said something, there are some issues with the electric buses and you're looking at the hydrogen buses. I'm sorry, that kind of went by that really quickly.
Mr. Mayor, through you to committee. So I was in response to Councillor Russell's comments about electric vehicles generally being a bit of a stopgap. That's an assessment I would agree with. He'd outlined numerous reasons and social concerns as well with, the batteries and where they come from and things like that. So, generally that's it. I mean, they are operationally, they will be more challenging in terms of range and that. And ultimately, if we can get to something like hydrogen, it is, better flexibility as a fuel source for transit. And I think it's certainly where we'll end up eventually. I mean, obviously going to electric is a good move from diesel in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. But I think ultimately we will find ourselves at hydrogen as an endpoint.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no other speakers.
Mr. Mayor, since Mr. Regi's now online, could I ask him about the extension of rural express transit on the 100 series highways beyond the current service boundary? If you want to cut down commuting traffic and greenhouse gases and traffic jams on the corridors, we need to have the transit, park ride transit expansions done. Is there any comment in regards to that within the Halifax plan?
Mr. Mayor, through you. So as of now, the only council approved extension of the rural express transit is for Murchison Road. So if future council direction changes, then we will certainly adapt to that. But that is the sole project that there is council direction for now, and that one does exist in the capital budget a few years out.
Okay. So colleagues, I think that's it. We've passed a couple of motions today. Had a good discussion. There is no other main motion on the floor. I know we all want to thank Shannon and her team. I don't know how long it's been since I've known Shannon through this work, but I know I was calling her Medema back in those days, and we've all come to know how to pronounce her name and the important work that she's been doing. So I think we all express our appreciation to Shannon and her team, and we look forward to having today's discussion inform us as we go forward with budget and other discussions. I'll just ask Shannon if there's any last words.
No, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for the discussion today.
Awesome. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, CAO. Colleagues, I hope you all have a good weekend. We have a busy week next week with council and committee of the whole back on budget. And thank you all today. See you soon. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Shannon. Great job.